crashes, defective products, dangerous drugs, injuries, and abuse. Across the state of Alabama, the attorneys, proudly sponsored by the law firm of Hollis Wright, are here to serve you. Your tough legal questions answered by our experts with host David Lamb and the attorneys of Hollis Wright.
Good evening and welcome into the attorneys. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Got a really interesting topic of conversation we're going to cover in the next half hour, but love to have you be a part of it. Number of ways for you to do that. Information at the bottom of the screen all throughout the program. Attorneys from Hollis Wright are standing by live right now and all throughout this program. That's a free, confidential, and off-air conversation that is yours for the taking. So a great opportunity to get some free legal advice thanks to the folks at Hollis Wright. And the numbers you need to know: 844-529-8255 or locally 205-324-3600. Leading our conversation, he's a managing partner of Hollis Wright. Good to see you, Josh Wright.
Good to see you too. Hope you're doing well.
Doing well. Thank you, sir.
Well, you know, David, we do this topic every once in a while, and a lot of times we'll try and do it in the right format. And
Right.
We're bringing on a great guest tonight that's going to be able to help kind of lead, guide, and direct us through what happens if you've had a DUI and how you protect yourself and the interplay between a DUI and the civil cases, because a lot of times DUI involves an accident.
Right.
So we're going to be talking about all those things tonight. This is one of those topics that we are not experts in at Hollis Wright, of course, and we bring on experts. So Jay Tidwell is with us tonight to talk about this, and this is something that Jay does in his practice, in addition to some other things that he does, but this is a specialty he has. And DUI is not something you want to mess around with if you don't know what you're doing. And so people that do this type of law really focus in on changes to the law, to case law adjustments, and to how the statute changes over time, and it has a lot. We're going to be talking about some of that stuff tonight. So first of all, Jay, super happy to have you back on. I know it's been a while since you've been on, but thank you for coming back on and talking about this topic.
Oh, thanks for having me. Glad to. You know, the DUIs, you're absolutely correct. There is a lot of change that's been going on that will probably continue to go on. To try to, you know, prevent people from driving under the influence, whether it's alcohol or drugs or anything like that.
Yeah, and I was going to ask you about that. Let's jump straight to that. So the DUI statute doesn't just apply to somebody who's drinking and driving. It could relate to substance abuse too, could it not?
Correct. And that's a big misconception. And a lot of what I've seen a lot of recently is marijuana. Across the country, not so much here. Alabama's made a little bit of progress towards legalizing medical marijuana, whole new topic. But there have been a influx of DUIs related to marijuana. So marijuana, controlled substance, even substances that aren't controlled that could impact your ability to safely operate a motor vehicle is covered under the DUI law. So you're right, it's not just alcohol.
How'd you get into this area of the law? Because this really is, and I say oftentimes there are specialties. I'm not sure I'd call DUI a specialty, but what I would call it is something that requires you to be all in. You can't partially handle these cases. If you got to stay abreast of the changes in the law. So how did you get into this area and commit yourself to it?
You're correct. It is, you know, a focused area of the criminal defense. So I graduated law school, fortunate enough to go work for a big law firm. Started off making, you know, good money at a big law firm, and realized that that's not the career path I wanted to take. I wanted to try to help people that got into trouble, that had some issues in their lives. You know, if you look back, there's probably something that just about everybody said that they've done at one time or another that they could have gotten in trouble for, whether they did or didn't. So I really like the fact of being able to help people overcome whatever challenges in front of them. And hopefully, you know, a lot of clients, lawyers say, I like repeat clients. I really don't.
Yeah.
I like for my clients to refer me to other clients, but I don't like to see them again because they hadn't really learned their lesson and they're still getting in trouble. So I want to help people is why I got into this, and the best way to do it in the way I see it is something like this.
That's great. That's why a lot of us got into this area or into the practice of law itself. And this is really a calling and something that's important. Now, talk to us, Jay, just for a second about changes in the law, because I know the DUI law has changed back in 2011 or 12 with the legislative cycle, and then most recently there's been some changes too, has there not?
Yeah, in 2018, several new laws went into play. The interlock system, which is something you have to put in your car if you get a DUI, that's become mandatory in a lot of cases. For example, there's something called pretrial diversion programs where it gives first-time offenders an opportunity to do a bunch of stuff, have the case dismissed at the end. It's mandatory now that you have to have an interlock. That was part of the new law. Another thing was the look-back period was 5 years. Now it's 10 years. Look back basically means that there are enhanced punishments for second-time DUIs, third-time DUIs, and so on. Prior to this new law, the prosecution could only go back 5 years to deem it a second DUI. Now they can go back 10 years, so if you've had a previous DUI within 10 years, then your new DUI becomes a second DUI.
Well, and that's one of the strongest changes in the law that I can remember in my practice, is the look-back period has changed. Mm-hmm. And with that, I mean, 10 years is a long time for a lot of people that have had that DUI one. You know, and I get a lot of people that will call into the show and say, well, you know, I feel like I'm being targeted by the police. The reality is, when you're pulled over, the police probably have some level of information about your criminal background based on running your tag and some of those things, where they may know whether or not you have been through one of these events in the past. So you want to try and do the pretrial diversion or the other things that are allowed under the law to try and protect yourself if you get a DUI, and that's why you want to go to a guy like Jay.
Yeah. All right, it's time for us to step aside. This is our first break of the evening. Let's step aside. Let's take a quick break. As we do so, a couple of reminders. Don't forget, we'd love to have you join the conversation. That information at the bottom of your screen. Also, you can find Hollis Wright all over social media. Just search the term Hollis Wright. You'll find them on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, just about everywhere. So check them out and keep up a great informational and educational resource. Stay tuned. More of The Attorneys coming right up.
I'm Josh Wright with the law firm of Hollis Wright, a personal injury law firm. Thank you for watching The Attorneys. Now, we hope you, a friend, or a loved one never needs legal counsel for a case. But if you do, the goal of the show is simple: provide answers and legal counsel when you need it the most. Your call to the show is free, so if you have questions specific to the show or related to other accident or injury-related topics, you can call, email, or text us. Or you can also follow us on Facebook or Twitter, or simply contact us by going to hollis-wright.com and click on the Contact Us link. We know your time is valuable, so thank you for spending it with us watching The Attorneys. It's common for a potential client to ask, there are many great firms out there. What separates Hollis Wright from other law firms? My response is generally to talk about the strengths of our law firm in handling cases throughout Alabama and the United States. That we've recovered through verdicts and settlements, hundreds of millions of dollars for our clients. That we have financial resources to hire any required expert and to take their case all the way to trial, even if it costs us hundreds of thousands of dollars to do so. That we settle cases for top dollar before trial is needed because the insurance companies and defendants know we have the ability to take a case all the way to trial. That we handle cases only on a contingency fee, which means we never ask the client to pay any costs of litigation whatsoever and only recover those costs in a fee if we win for the client. That we have a staff of more than 20 employees that help us litigate cases from start to finish. That we've had a television show on NBC 13 for 6 years that answers thousands of questions to citizens for free each year. But what I've learned in the last 20 years as a trial lawyer is that clients want more and deserve more than all those things. Those things are expected of each law firm they consider. So with that wisdom, what I tell clients now is simply this: we are a family-oriented practice at Hollis Wright, just like their own family. that we are a team-oriented group that engages in team-building exercises and team-building events because it helps our clients win cases. That we are dads and moms and brothers and sisters. That we are former Alabama trial lawyer presidents. That we return every single telephone call from every single client. That our bedside manner is second to none. So what really separates our firm from others? We're balanced and well-rounded, and as such, we relate to people not just as lawyers, but as compassionate human beings. Human beings that know what it's like to face a day in court. We are advocates, we are compassionate, we are tireless. We are, simply put, Hollis Wright.
Welcome back in to the Attorneys. Grateful for you joining us each and every Sunday evening. Very thankful for that and your presence here. Hey, a reminder before we head back into the conversation, the numbers that you need to know, 844-529-8255. That's the toll-free number, or locally here in the Birmingham area, 205-324-3600. And that's the way you can get in touch with the attorneys from Hollis Wright who are standing by. As we head back into our conversation, a question here about deferred DUI or pretrial diversion program. Can you help us understand what that is?
Absolutely, and I think I touched a little bit before on it, but generally there's a lot of courts in different jurisdictions have what's called either a pretrial diversion or some type of diversion type program. They call it a little bit different at different places, but essentially what it is let's say it's the first DUI, you haven't been in trouble, you don't have a significant history or anything like that. The courts sometimes will give you an opportunity to go through some drug and alcohol treatment, classes, do some random drug and alcohol testing, pay some fines, and the ignition interlock device installed on your vehicle for 6 months. And once you complete all of that, then the DUI case would then be dismissed. So the benefit is that you complete everything, you do everything, you show the court that you don't have an addiction problem and this was just a mistake, a one-time thing. Case dismissed, you don't have a DUI conviction record.
Jay, answer two things for me. One is my recollection when the law changed back in 2012, if you were found for a first offense of 0.15 or above, all right, so not just 0.08, but 0.15 or above in a first offense, that was an aggravated DUI. Is that still the case?
That is correct.
Okay.
Refusals and 0.15 and above, they carry enhanced punishments.
Okay.
And it varies based on first, second time. But they do carry enhanced punishments.
And then also having a child in the car with a blood alcohol concentration of 0.08 or above, and I know people would say, well, nobody ever drives with their kids intoxicated, but that happens more than you think. I mean, coming home from football games, coming home from parties, family reunions, those things, it happens, those things are also aggravated, are they not?
You're correct. If a child is 14 or under in the car, then it can enhance the punishments as well. And like you said, even going out to dinner and having a few drinks, because if you have a few drinks within an hour or so, then you could be over that 0.08 level. And even though you might not think you feel intoxicated or you're not stumbling or falling down, you still could be over the legal limit. We talk about this when we do these DUI shows, David. There's an interplay between the criminal side of DUI and the civil side. One of the things that I do in my practice is I'm involved in alcohol-related injuries where someone's injured because of alcohol. And often it's from a bar, a restaurant, a convenience store, a country club, something like that. And so at the end of the day, there's an interesting interplay. A lot of times what we're doing is we're waiting as the district attorney is doing his job on the DUI side, and someone like Jay is
advising someone that's been through that circumstance, and we're waiting for the DA to finish their work, and then we roll in and use the criminality side of the DUI in order to help the civil case if somebody's been injured because of that person. So not only does the person that is drinking and driving have criminal potential penalties, they could have significant civil penalties, and it doesn't just happen when you're in a car. It could be on a wave runner, in a boat, anything else. So any motorized vehicle, you could find yourself in trouble. So there's an interesting interplay between the both laws.
Mm-hmm. You're absolutely right, and I may interject real quick.
Please.
And if someone is guilty of DUI in the criminal aspect, as you know, they can't relitigate that part in the civil. So if you're guilty in the criminal and you go in the civil and say, no, I wasn't drinking and driving, you can't do that. You've already been established guilty, so someone like you would be able to then turn and say, yes, they were in fact guilty of drunk driving.
Yep. So, and imagine this: if you're litigating the civil side of the case, and the person's already pled guilty or found guilty of criminality in drinking and driving, it puts the establishment that overserved that person at a real disadvantage, especially when you have the drunk driver also in the case. Alabama recognizes something called joint and several liability, which means you can have multiple defendants and you can get a joint judgment against the multiple defendants, and you can collect all or none of the verdict that you get against any of those parties. So it requires the facility who overserved the drunk driver to potentially pay for the conduct of the drunk driver. It's a complicated area of the law. We could do a whole show on it, but at the end of the day, joint and several liability is a significant tool used by lawyers, especially when you have a criminal conviction or a plea of guilt in a civil context.
A question that we've got here that we get every time we do this show is, do you have to be driving to be charged with DUI?
That's a great question. I get it a lot, actually. Yeah. No, you do not have to be driving. The law says that you have to have the ability to drive or move the vehicle. So, for example, you could be sitting in your driveway, turn the car on a little bit to have the radio playing while you're out there drinking or doing whatever, and legally you could get a DUI for that. Now, most of the cases I've seen related to that aren't those fact patterns. Most of it is someone's in a parking lot. Most of the time they've pulled over and said, you know what, I don't need to be driving. I'm going to stay here and sleep it off or things like that. And those are most of the cases you typically see. But you don't have to be physically driving. And another point to make is the cop or the police officer does not have to physically see you driving either. They can establish it by circumstantial evidence, which basically means if you're pulled over on the side of the interstate and you're by yourself and the cop pulls up and determines you've been drinking, well, it's logical to assume that you've been driving since no one else is there with you.
When we come back, I do want to talk about when you should get an attorney and what you can expect financially if you find yourself in this circumstance.
All right, we're headed to our final break of the evening. Would love to have you join the conversation. Stay tuned. More of The Attorneys is coming right up.
I'm attorney Tyler Vale with the law firm of Hollis, Wright. Many people ask the same question: why should I hire a lawyer? While there may be some legal situations that do not require you to hire a lawyer, the clear majority of legal problems would certainly benefit from having competent counsel involved. To begin with, the law is complicated. Even experienced lawyers typically do not represent themselves in court. A solid case with clear liability can quickly unravel without the help of a trained attorney. Lawyers understand the rules of evidence and know how to properly lay a foundation to get critical evidence and testimony admitted into court. Lawyers are trained to recognize legal problems early on in a case and can help avoid pitfalls that unrepresented individuals may fall into. Lawyers can also increase the value of a case by getting experts involved to help prove additional damages that an unrepresented person may not realize they are entitled to. An experienced lawyer has probably worked on cases like yours and can give insight to negotiating a fair settlement based on recent jury verdicts and settlements that unrepresented individuals may not have access to. Another important reason to hire an attorney is because the person or business you sue will likely have legal representation themselves. Non-attorneys are generally at a disadvantage when squaring off against opposing counsel or doing business with another party that has legal counsel. The law is complicated, and an attorney who is representing your adversary may try to take advantage of it. Our law firm offers free case consultations that allow you to meet with us for free during a face-to-face meeting, where we can discuss the type of case you have, the potential value of your case, and your likelihood of success. This initial meeting can help you decide whether you need to hire a lawyer. Please remember, your call, email, or text to the attorneys is free. All of us at Hollis Wright want to help answer your questions on real issues you face. Remember, a competent lawyer will respond to every question you send in. That's our pledge and promise to you. Thanks for watching The Attorneys on WVTM 13.
Welcome back into The Attorneys, our final segment here. So just a few minutes remaining. If you want to join the conversation, the numbers to know, 844-529-8255 or locally 205-324-3600. Josh?
All right, so Jay, I do want to talk about this. We obviously promote information about various topics on this show, and we encourage people in a lot of circumstances that there are times when they can do it alone and they don't need an attorney. This is not one of those circumstances, though, is it?
Correct. My opinion would be you definitely need an attorney, and one that handles a lot of DUI cases, because like we talked about earlier, it is kind of a special area in the law. But you also need to contact an attorney right away. One of the things that police officers either tell you or kind of gloss over is that you actually have 10 days after the date of arrest to do something. What I'm referring to is the driver's license suspension. If you do not file or request a hearing regarding your driver's license suspension within 10 days after your arrest, then your driver's license will be automatically suspended. So you've got a very short window to do that, and usually you need to get with an attorney as quickly as possible.
And what can happen if you get with an attorney? Can you get your license restricted only for certain purposes? Like, can you get a work ability to drive to work? What can the lawyer do?
There are no hardship provisions for a DUI. Now, there are for some other issues when your license gets suspended, but not for a DUI in Alabama. So if you get a DUI, you really have a couple, well, your two choices are take your suspension or fight it. And there are a lot of ways that a lawyer can fight it to either shorten the suspension or to remove it altogether.
Do you find that the penalties, or let me ask it this way, do you find that the courts are getting more open-minded or becoming more open-minded to work with first-time offenders, or less open-minded? Does that make sense?
It does, and first-time offenders, I think they are more open to work with, okay? However, depending on the circumstances, for example, we talked about earlier about blowing over 0.15 or refusing to blow, they're less likely. Okay. I think in general, the DUI laws have become stricter, and people are being punished more severely than they ever have. For example, laws have come out that says you can't plead a DUI down to a reckless driving or speeding or anything like that. And then the commercial driver's license area is that you can't even go into a deferred prosecution program for if you have a commercial driver's license, regardless of whether you're driving a commercial vehicle at the time.
Yeah, that's a strong penalty.
Yeah, it sure is. They've definitely it's got more severe. Question, you mentioned, Jay, the breathalyzer question we always get when we do a show like this. Am I required to perform the roadside sobriety test or the breathalyzer?
No, you're not required to perform it. There are consequences if you don't. If you refuse, they can use that in court. As we talked a little bit about earlier, your punishments can be enhanced if you're found guilty on refusing, but you are not required to do it, and you're not required to blow.
Do you find that it's easier to plea those cases down if somebody does not do a field sobriety test or blow?
Not necessarily. a lot of times the courts have, this goes back to the previous questions about how courts are tolerating these. It seems like now a lot of courts are saying, well, you didn't cooperate.
Yeah.
So we're not going to try to give you a break because you didn't cooperate. Every jurisdiction is different, whether you get arrested in Birmingham, Hoover, Vestavia, Mountain Brook, wherever. All of their programs are a little different. Some will say you can't get in if you have a refusal, even on a first time on a deferred program. So they're all a little different.
Talk to us about out-of-state driving under the influences. Do those continue to go on your record? For example, let's say you got one in Mississippi when you were in college, and then 6-7 years later you get one in Alabama. Do those things continue to carry with you?
Absolutely, and that's a big misconception that I get from clients. You know, I'll ask them, one of my intake questions is, have they had any priors? And they'll say no, and then they'll say, well, wait a minute, I had one when I was in Florida, but that's in Florida, that doesn't matter. Actually, it does matter. Every DUI conviction matters, whether it was in Alabama, Florida, Georgia, Maine, wherever.
And maybe correct me if I'm wrong here. My understanding is if you also get, like during the summertime, you get a boating under the influence, that will qualify as a DUI, will it not?
No.
Okay.
No, it does not. So a boating under the influence is separate from a DUI.
Okay.
And the boating under the influence would not suspend your driver's license either.
Okay. All right. Another reason why you want to get to a lawyer if something like that happens to you.
Absolutely. All right, less than 2 minutes remaining, so not a whole lot of time left in the show, but I want to give both of you the opportunity for a final thought. And Jay, if you would, you go first, please, sir.
Sure. Well, I appreciate you guys having me on first, and your viewers for listening to me speak. I want to tell you, this is what I do for a living. I handle a lot of DUI cases, but my message to you would be that, don't drive if you've been drinking. Go out and have a good time if you want to. Get an Uber, Lyft, friend, sober driver, because there's a lot of bad things that can happen. If you do get into some trouble or your kids get into some trouble, give me a call and we'll help you see what we can do to try to straighten everything back out.
And if you forget Jay's name, we're going to get you to him. So all you got to do is call us, and we're on every Sunday, and we can get you to Jay if you have this unfortunate circumstance. The piece of advice that I would give is there are so many alternative and options now to operate a vehicle. Nobody on the show is telling you that you can't go out and have a fun time with your friends and your family and maybe even coworkers, but you need to do so responsibly, and the way to do it responsibly is to use some of these alternative options like taxis, like Lyft, like Uber. It's so prevalent in Birmingham and the surrounding area and the viewing audience right now that in a lot of these communities you've got that option, and you ought to use it because it's going to save you a lot of heartache and a lot of financial money down the road.
Yeah, play it safe. That's good advice. Appreciate it, gentlemen.
Great job.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for the time. Thank you being with us, and thank you as well. We really appreciate you joining us each and every Sunday evening as we wrap things up. The way that you can get in touch with the firm, 844-529-8255, 324-3600. They'll be sure and get back with you. Also, just search them on social media, Hollis Wright, and you'll find them there. Thanks so much for the time. We'll see you next time right here on The Attorneys.
Thanks for watching The Attorneys, sponsored by Hollis Wright.